Okay, friends online, hi Ridi. We'll get started now.
아니 가서 ngema shera le sabate le sangate karrezana ane susu chewote sokane le sagre ane susu chewo main khate so papa so kan le sag mare la yana te ngaso yama kode kesheshete monchisha karla le sala susu chewote so le sazete pechek le sagre kham pechek le susu chewo sara papa la so le samare zate pechek le pechek le sag mare ma to cheto le sagres yena ta cheto tis choba mombo chire yena yontal sheton rachi tendencies.
So in the last class we talked about karma and how karma is accumulated, or which beings accumulate karma. And so I said in the last class that Arya beings do not accumulate karma, and normal beings, like non-Arya beings, do accumulate karma. And there's a lot of debate about this. Another explanation for this that is very common is that Arya beings do not accumulate what we would call propelling karma. So that's karma that propels a birth under the power of karma and afflictions. Whereas normal beings, us normal beings, we do accumulate this type of propelling karma. So we accumulate karma that causes us to be reborn under the power of karma afflictions, and Arya beings do not have that type of karma. But there's a lot of debate about how this whole thing. So now we are in the English text, we're on page 94, the process of death and conception. I don't think you'll actually need the text, it's okay, but do you have this text?
We know this text, we just...
Okay, yeah, okay, it should be fairly easy to follow. But.
ngaso shendro tene tanda ngaso pombo chandro tene pombo ti trome ba chandra ote trod kane degres ne ba chagres ane shade shene pordun rales ane shejilan pordu kandin rugres ane chest cha ane pordun ronene chewa kandil degres ane sachi tinga.
So in this under J3 process of death and conception, there's 5 sections. The first is the causes of death, right? So what are the things that, the conditions and causes that lead to our death? The second one is consciousness at the time of death. So what is the mind like when we're dying? The third section here is how the body loses heat, right? So when we die, the body loses heat. And the word in Tibetan actually is like, sort of the heat is absorbed, or sometimes they translate it as dissolved, but it dissolves in specific ways. So the next section is about that. So the fourth is how the intermediate stage is assumed after death, or how the bardo, like what is the bardo, like how does that happen after death? And then how does rebirth take place is the fifth. So this is just the outline of the 5 sections.
ne lu Geshe ona lu Geshe gucho jakatsa ona te lu tata dene ne shirajora hotel tsizeni chawas ne yochemeni chawas ne yochemeni chati maso zan thwa to mukula so ba me tinde mukula so ka shajora ti shache ne kaze to meso chi chinchini chawas ne kashi khala zane ne zato mandini chawa ne kashi mezane meti mela maso meto tul chane ne chawane 맞아 쳇도들
되게 개발가리디 니바 당수마디 개발가리라
니바데 삼바에 니바 삼바 요체면이 차잖아 가서 칼라마라와도 아니 든디제네 요체면 수 가서 지iten달은 수알라 네 요체는 라만라지고라 티소마라는 차레스 아니 카제토 메소지 켄치네 아니 칼라요레스 칼라요나 칼라자
야보요마네
칼라자토만드네 가시 맞아 가르자고래 칼란다만다 칼라툰다부터 수수 만차야자네 루불라 만차바자네 시아지오라 얘네 메소치제나 ane kashi men ramanda za ane zato mandri ne sho med mela maso med tula so zera med ngone na med zana ngaso libul pegora til map tu tabashane shwas.
Okay, so in the section, the causes of death, right? So we break the causes of death into these three types of deaths, right? Based on their causes, so that you can say that you die from your lifespan being exhausted. So you basically just say you have 80 years to essentially to live, and you've lived the lifespan that your karma allows, and then you just die at the end of that time span. You can die. There's a death, so that's the first type of death. The second one is, in the text here, it says death from deprivation of necessities, right? So the idea basically is that we need lots of things to live, like food, housing, whatever, all of these sort of basic necessities of life. Right, so that third kind of death would be death from a lack of these things, right? So from not having food or housing or any of these things that we need to live. And the third death is death caused by food, medication, and the like. And so I asked Geshe, but there was discussion there was what is the difference between the two, because it sounds sort of similar between the 2 and 3. So the third one is really that say you do have food, but it's not healthy or it's not good or it doesn't suit you. Or you have medication, but the medication doesn't work and actually becomes sort of poisonous for you or something, right? So anyway, so this is just 3 different ways to think about what causes death.
ane tanda tino samato tonga jamoto cheto ngaso ane tanda tumai bin chawa ane parche on kin chawa azne chawa cheto manda parche chon pena ngaso mota dane sha jora mota dane shawa to ane tumai bin sha azne bu chonchon bin kan shawa o teso tumai bin shawa azne teso cheto laure chim de jo chimbo to ri khashil mo tonga ja.
So this is not an exhaustive list of the causes of death, of course, right? I think in the Lamrim Chimo there's actually a more exhaustive list, right? Because of course, right, there are people that can die. You can die from a car wreck, you can die from an accident. Children can just die, right? So anyway, just pointing out that this 3 types of deaths are not. This is not intended to be a complete list.
ane cheto tsizeni chawazan tangaso tsise tataji susu tsizeni chawad tan cheto tataji koro tiremba jemata so timayimba soma
di kare di chi di tsise
tsizeni
le jok
pena ngandawachi le kiwa tandandaji lu geju guju dezik tsijiona lejiona ane ti tata dene
ni dila de lela dene
tsezena lezana tako pena miji tbani teba tata androag sashajona tata androtoni shaj ti porir shamayimba tatil tsizeni suzu tsi luchuna chude nishuna nishuka tse tataji
di tsete di lela So the first type of death, this idea of exhaustion of lifespan. So this is like, according to your karma, you have this lifespan that that you're going to live, and you live out the full lifespan, then die is when this sort of karma for that lifespan is exhausted, right? You don't sort of have an accident in the middle or anything.
Ani tanda ngasoyo nonchudo tesona Tsila rend songa zene tsikil hama jora terens pena nga na tende chena ne dombande ne chuda tende chena tsireri to ayores tsireri to yore te tsiti tanda kanda nga ndaje lu chine lu chupe de ayona ti litela non chu che kar chena ko tata zonra ma tsitil li tsidala reri to ayomares yena yo nga so jate je tende tsila renzen nga so tiwa ngama lu chudegon lu chudebi tsijiona lu chuma den lu nga den tsil hama jora o tisolo pa robanda chene ne tsil hama tiso pa lu reri to amato tsikor lu chuma to mena tila reri to ayomares
So the kari da the
Tsilaren so azena
the gin jungna the la pinto the ganso the lay tang de we get se data padrogi tipuma
teto pananganda jeta lu ngochu daina ngochu tata ma nga jete che kar chena tsidala renro mares yena yo ne tsilazena ne kya ngema to tesol tsilhama pananga kya ngoma to lunga ngochu da tsijiona tingachuma deninga lu sunju she yora otil hamate solo pa tindi Silala roba chamato. The Sindala lunga judana tata mato into mares.
So when we think about doing these practicing these long life practices, right, working with these long life deities or yidams or these long life practices, these cannot expand your life. Like if you have this amount of time that your karma is essentially allowing you to live, you can't expand past that time. But what it can do is, like, say if you've accrued negative karma in the past, it's going to harm you in this life and might cause you to die before that time. Then it can help you extend your life to that time. But you can't do these long life practices and then have a life longer than you have accrued the karma to actually live.
Chevi sensor. Tan chevi sautalana gesangon to chani shawato, Magevi sangon to chani shawa, and then Lomate sangon to chani shawate, Chasatela stomp.
So now of the five, the five things that I introduced, the first was the causes of death. Now we're at the number 2, the consciousness at the time of death. And the consciousness of the time of death is subdivided into 3. Sort of having a virtuous consciousness at the time of death, having a non-virtuous consciousness at the time of death, and having a neutral consciousness at the time of death.
And Gesangon to Chani Shazati, that's Surin Chakalamola Sheote, and we cheto chetene, we yatom, cheto chetene, shetora, or Tindi chetene, some give you some. Suzuka Salutone give you some one to Chavacheto, and they count the Suzuka Salutomatona, Mijimbagatene, Cheragiva Cheko, and Lamala Soata Corezene, and Anjo Tilshene, Gesangon to Chava. Oh, Tindichani Shach, and you Mugivis out, but I teach him at
So having a virtuous consciousness at the time of death is, right when you're dying, and right at that moment when the breath is stopping, right, and you're really beginning this final stage of the death process. If you are able to think about your Lama or the Buddha or Dharma or have one of these virtuous thoughts, right, that is really helpful. This is what we're talking about, having that kind of mind, thinking about that as at that moment of the death process really beginning. Also, it's possible, say, if you're not able to think about it, but a friend or a teacher or someone is able to whisper in your ear and bring that to mind for you, right, when you're dying.
And that Gesangon to Chani Shasona, Karayorazan, Mentron, no one to art and Dalazan, as a member Shakalamo member Napu, Tupundawichi, Menkondawi, and Menkon, Noah, who was up with and authentic Noah letters, and they check which Chetochan, Dingayo, Chonjo, Shichimbo mind about Tindi.
And so the quality, or the signs or effects, I'm not sure how to say that, of dying with this virtuous consciousness, this virtuous thought, is that you have the sensation of going from darkness to light in the death process, and you don't experience a lot of extreme suffering while you're dying.
And Magivisa want to Chani Shal, Taketa Shiba, Yona Suzuka Magiva, Salon Koyona, Majimbaka, Salon Kochu, or Tindicheteni. We said Chetochan, Dosa Conto, Dramanda, Chungonta, and a Shazona, and no one mentioned to do it. Goyos and a woman's and a Shakala, and a dinner top on you, or authentic Chabaras.
And so then we have the dying with a virtuous consciousness, dying with a non-virtuous consciousness, and dying with a neutral consciousness. So the second one, dying with a non-virtuous consciousness, is basically the opposite. If at the time of death, right at that moment when your breath is stopping and you're really getting into this death process, if you have a non-virtuous mind, so you have a mind that's full of attachment or anger or something like that, or if someone around you causes you to have that mind, right, it's either way, then you have sort of the opposite experience. You feel like you're going from light into darkness, and you also will experience great suffering in the death process.
And Loma Tenji Shazan, and Taki Shianoja Gesang on the Macha, Moge Sang on the Macha, and Shandrote, ane tanda dingwa to so ane dewi dingwa me ane tanda dingwa marata dewi shenro tane dewa manyo dingwa manyo ane loma te tindingwa shenro rasa.
And so then dying with sort of a neutral consciousness, right, that's neither particularly virtuous or non-virtuous, you basically don't have a strong sense of happiness or peace or suffering, right? You have just sort of a middle consciousness, neutral consciousness there.
ane samba trukone dabas ane ta shenro te nga so pombo te ro chandra ro chandra te ne ro ti trude kane me pa chare ne te shere samba.
So then we have how the body loses the heat, right? And so here we're talking about this now. This is the body that has gone through the death process, and is a corpse, we would call it in English. And so how that the warmth goes away. You also can ask questions at any time. We're very informal about that.
So like the neutral dying consciousness, can you consider that dying peacefully? Does that mean like the person who is dying without any thought?
Lungmadin di ngatsudi lungmadin gi number shape di chiwetse di shiwa di ngatu chide tangdemba gi chiwa di reve.
Loma tengi chiwa zati. Ta ngaso tsizene chiwa zai mar. Ta ngaso loma tengi chiwa 위쳐갈라면 오늘 게사원도 맞아. 뭐 게사원도 맞아. 시아라 마토 따텔라 티치자 거러시잖아. 모란다 다니 시티 아니 위치한데 게왕원도 맞아. 뭐 게왕원도 맞아네. 시아 단다만다 요초그랬어.
이는데 공기 초르와 간지도 디 공기 초르와 디
대화요
말. 지어디 대화요래 디 시대요래.
니가 대화요 말 등어요 말. 실제로 가시 모타체 즈불 리불 나사시 첨부터는 시아죠라 딘저요 말에서 네 요 대화한다도 요 삼바치본다시 딘저요 대화마이 등어마이 돈냥군 찬염
So you can think, for example, someone that gets like hit by a car and dies very quickly, right? Maybe that doesn't even have time to think, right? So the idea here is that there's not in the virtuous dying consciousness, you die with this peaceful happiness, right? In the non-virtuous dying consciousness, you die suffering, and so this is really in the middle. Like there's just not a particularly happy or sad, and so it's sort of a balanced mind.
It sounds better.
I mean, I asked Geshe if it was a peaceful death, and he said no. So I think it means it's just not a mind. Yeah, I mean, is it acceptable? Like, I can ask that. What do you mean by acceptable? In what way?
I think it sounds better than dying with suffering, right?
Well, yeah, I'm sure it is. Yeah.
But you said like the Bena is if you die in an accident, but that time you probably unconsciousness. But here we are talking about.
But you die very quickly, I think was the reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, or also, yeah. So what should I ask?
Like, is this considered okay? Like.
The 대숨기 낭내 the yaksha the gewegi chi gewegi. The lungma den yang dis digireve.
Lomate la kararezana. Kor lomate gune shanayo. ngama gewal kamba shikchen boyona ani te gewa te ngon te cheni pardul sa jawa to ani magya shikchen boyona magya shikchen pardul sa jawa chabayora mato sheti chawati yo mares.
So the thing here really is that you don't have like if you have like lots of virtue in your past life or you're in your life, right, in your continuum of virtuous karma, then because that mind of death is sort of neutral, that will predominate, right? So, or the opposite, right? If you've done a lot of non-virtue, if you die with a neutral consciousness, that will dominate. But on the other hand, if you die with this virtuous thought, that has a very strong effect. Versus also, if you die with a negative mind, that has a very strong effect. So that's the point here. From a karmic perspective.
Loma tengi cheza jora. Chawad continue razana pena ngaso me kona asobala. Joti dikhayo Ka Nasamoto Tijana Nas Tremba Meba Chachiko Trameba Deva me Dinga many Tindishan Rajora or Tiris Nibatijaris. Zankono Masegonane, Kajaniko, Dinga Nyomachi, Deva Nyomachi, Tremba Mebandoji Shandrajora.
So, for example, like someone in prison who's being executed, and they give them a shot and they just get knocked out, before they die, so that they don't have any, there's really no thoughts going on, right? So that the mind of death. So the point, I think, is that he said, what Geshe said a second ago, is that the point is that the mind of death won't have much effect on where you're going, right? It's really your previous karma that will have the biggest effect.
And then also, Loma thing is that the Tremba Jala, Tremba Jala, and also Samsala go to Solo Jubaga shit in the Shichambochan, Tremba Meba Chandra Jura, Tremba Jala, Tremba Meba Chane.
Also, like if you get hit in the head, right, and you're passed out and then you live for a little while and then die while you're unconscious, right, that mind is not it's neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. Yeah, please, Rudy.
I'm not sure if I'm going to articulate this correctly, but if karma kind of dictates our lifespan and our death, then what is the role of free will and how does that fit into the picture?
So the shitse, ngapchu tekian. Say toti kan sakere di
Tila Tizenish.
Tite the karma tang dimba tang dela yadna. The karichini ngatsu gi damka ngatsu rang with jugi nupate kanji teniki keeper karieres.
Karasa Tite the Leighton Drayona?
The Leighton Drayona ngatsu the damka the keeper karieres. Benanga di aratung di tinje chena di ngati kyopo sigirebe sigirebe.
Pena tangaso Leighton Draw Chimboyores, Pena Le Sona Chimbo sa tindi, and Jimba Bana Sohlua Jora, Jinga so Mompucha Tindi Jan Le Mombusanga Jena, de Tede Redindu Res. And Kadiana so chunga Tindi Yena. Ane te chiton res. Te chiton ade chindala nga name de nyon tu mare. Pena tantan jaw jena nga solo mombuche, so mombucha tindi jena. Ti name de kiwa chama me sabara, chimi chama me sabara.
Yene de te dil nang la.
Chindala no la te.
Ti kangi damka kanji di nga di.
Kiwa ngamane. Ta nga so damga di yo mares.
Yene di so I don't think I quite got your question, but let me give you the answer I've got so far, really. The choices we make have a big determination on our lifespan in the sense that, like if we're very bad in this life and we kill lots of animals, then in future lives we'll tend to have shorter lifespans and experience more disease. Versus if we accumulate lots of good karma in this lifetime, in future lives, we'll have longer lives and healthier lives. But of course, the karma is acting on our future lifetimes, not our current lifetime. But I think your question is more like, for example, say in this life, if I decided to smoke and do drugs or these kinds of things that are going to have an effect on my lifespan? Is that kind of what you mean?
Yes, as in I mean I can generate good karma now, but for my previous lifetimes that I'm now going to be the recipient of good or bad, I don't really have free will there, right? So a lot of it is dictated by things that have already happened and not as opposed to things that I have control over now.
Yeah, I mean that's the idea, right? That it's your previous karma. So kungi, but yeah. So kungi the youngegi tiwa the kungi tseti nangla kungi ngumagi gyawagi sakbe lete the yeah. So the lives that we're living right now, right, are greatly determined by what we did in past lives, in the Buddhist understanding.
Penanga so ngaso chi the re to thori to on shati yo mare yana karare zena ngaso chi se tan ja mo bo shin roate pena nganda chi lu chine lu chebe de chi tata kya ngama ka sa de yo na ti pare parche chwa yo res parche chwa teo kya ngama like won pena to bane dili pandro mota tata ngune na tiri gonda mota de chi de tu bane ndo so ni joba chize damba tata la dili lendu kores yana launga la ne parche chone ne mota khulu to na jo ata ndamanda chen pake tata le ma to achora oti no je parche nga so
Megi sakbe like
this is go parche chen
you know, so it's we can have sort of karma to live a certain amount of time, but also because of past karma, we can have obstacles that arise, right? So we could have accumulated past karma, negative karma in the past, and it can arise and create obstacles to our health. For example, like if you're driving from here to Delhi and you're going to leave here early in the morning and maybe get to Delhi at 10 o'clock at night, but then along the way, an obstacle arises and delays you. In that same way, you can have obstacles arise from karma in past lives that can create problems.
ne parche tela ne kya ngama ko parche yo chola sinde ko parche yo ngon ki le ton charchi chen za chora charchi che na pen tanda Sindala yo parche chone kya ngama ke le mai na sindala sa pele te ko parche chene serembon romo to a atinde yo res
Yang na ti so sidila yang sakbe like
kya parche cha parche che
We also things that we can accumulate karma or create causes also in this life that will affect this life as well, right? That can create obstacles for ourselves in this very life. Bena ti country na.
Bena sindala parche ta ti ngaso sindala charchi chen za ne mombo she charchi na ham bharatan chalan charchi che la na tan da lower to neko bena ngaso kenzan ne andru ti pare khatu ma za ro jo ti no je sindala ngaso chisa tata ro de yo na ne tingal le sa to ma kya ngama ke le ma yin ba ti to le sa to man de ne tin de ki ne parche che ayo res yana Tilete ki chola tik parche chere zane, lete khatun zaga chusho zane, te shetsete ma hacho lindi ki najo chamo yizo linda ki chola nöki ne chola shigare zane.
That's very good, yeah. So we can't say, right, there's no way it's what karma is as a right, like if something bad happens, like say you're walking down the stairs and you fall, right, and that creates like, you can say that is the result of karma, and that could be the result of karma that you've accumulated in this life. Or in future lives, right? This is considered very subtle. It's called a very subtle phenomena. So this is something that really only a Buddha could say, like what specific act of karma causes what specific negative outcome in your life, right? That's not something we're able to know.
Pena ngaso meza to mandrini shiajora. Ina tolo noba chiati megi yimba hakures. Meti zane mandria ngaso shiayimba hakures. Ina ti met zabe le kanti sare ti met ngemangas kanti chene met za le sare tindi za ti le to patsena ha chu chamo yeso
no so the min sena de konna de kering min sena
pena ngas mezani chawala dura pena ngaso samsam mezana gonana gomeza monta ne mejemba ne mandrini shiajora tinga so ti kinta karya ha kores me ti zane mandria nga so sha ha kores yena ta me ti za ke liti kanti sare tindi chese te liti payo ha chamu.
So for example, also we could say like in terms of this death from medicine, right? So some people take medicine and they heal very quickly, whereas some other people take medicine and they end up dying. And it could be the same medicine for the same illness. And so you could say that that was a difference of their karma, but we can't say, right, this like what karma led to that outcome is something that's very, very subtle that we're not able to be that specific about.
Pena so lindi hachu tamu hamuka kararezana tana ngomba zo yo atino liji number member samji macho pauza ta liji name lisato hachu samji ngaso lungo masho atindi res tanchen chamba mato shigmares maybe jinsa kares macha yo ngaso 마차게 줘.
Matcha.
마차게 그 줘진도. 디 줘도 스틸라네 최서보 마 종 순돈다만다도. 어디 좀 리그원이 잡으래서. 디 리그 나오자다 서버가 타지차 때 마부차 가르래. 가시 렘보 가시 통로 간데 타지차 겐체도네 뭐시오사 들리나 하쿠토래서 막. 아주 수지 타마와티 아주 커버렸어.
So in the Abhidharma text, from the great Indian scholars, the Abhidharma text, there's a quote that I can't translate directly, but basically the idea is just reinforcing this idea that the actual connections between the karma and the outcomes is this incredibly subtle phenomena, right? So the example of peacocks gets used, and so the peacock feathers, and why some peacocks' feathers are longer or smaller, have brighter colors or dimmer colors, or these different colors, right? That's all determined by karma, but actually making those connections between the karma and the effect in the karma that was accrued is something only a Buddha can do. Only the omniscient mind of a Buddha is capable of seeing.
아니 당아서 신주되네 조간이 돌아라 리볼라네 아니 먹게 몸부 쟁카야나나 네 조딩아 좀 동부 제스는 거네마 갈래를 조디 매바 차네네 닌칼레 네 닌칸네 나우시도 포도라스 아니 게와 쟁카야나 조디 콤바세모네야 야레 아니 닌칸도네 나우시도 포도라스
담바티 미게와티
먹게한테 거네마 갈래 당아서 제대나 돈나 마차마도 메지셰 신도데 타나네 조데 가신 거네 마도 가시 콤바네 야도 네 닌칸네 포토치아 지바레스 나시티 닌칸네 도고레스 어디요레스
And so here in this section, how the body loses heat, right? So if you have a body that has died engaging in this negative mind, this non-virtuous mind, then what happens is the body begins to lose heat from the head down, and then to the heart center, and the consciousness leaves from the heart center. If you die with a mind that's engaging in virtuous thoughts, then it's the opposite. It starts from the bottom up to the heart center, and then leaves from there.
아니 다 디소 가르치는 아수신 디소 초파 제네시아든지 말이지. 그래서 뇨아 짱아마 땡케도네 단다요 또반 통부든지 창게데서 그 하고 요레스.
So how do we know this, right? This isn't just guessing, right? We know this because these really great realized beings actually have experienced this and remember this and have told us about this.
아니 because 나서 치와 종자 정도 셔도 종고래자 노천의 몸부시아요. 시아. 요 가시가 또반서 시아를 가르 종아요. 그 종가 그런식이 신도라서. 텐디사 몸부에는 얘는 시와 조알라 네 구바침보 요레스.
Gupachimbo.
고바침보라나네 펜도침보 수조 배치. 티케침보레스.
So this comes up a lot. Like, how do we know this? How do we know about what happens at the time of death, right? But so this is how we know about this, and it's really helpful. It's really important to understand this process. It's really beneficial for us to understand this process.
아니 치와 종자 가르자네 수수 마시코네 아니 그스탕아 시소나 샤와자 전에네 정도전에 신도데 간디체레전에네 조도소 간이 메바차도 아니 메도 나 소마를 단센다만다 몸불래요사라 대전 내자 전에시아 딱나게 정도 몸부시 대소시자 전에 몸부 정대요라서 대정대나네 수수 시칼라모 하고 그래서 당아시도 아니 당이 처위체서 아니 나와고 먹고와 차서 아니 찔러 루머뇨 같은데 소마 좀 하고래서
Jason didn't see.
근데 좀 몸부 하고서는 지망군이 시대 아니 수수기 시와 따다 하고 다 체름 받든지 차서 하고 딘디 하고서는 근데 사태는 가서 듣다오식 사진도 오 디지알라 조틱체도 좋아네 되게 좋은데 요래서.
So when we talk about this, right, the death process is explained in great detail, and particularly in the tantric text, there's a lot of detail about the different minds and the sensations, and like how you lose the sensation from the sight and the ears, and this whole process of how the sort of your mind changes and withdraws as you die, right? And so it's really helpful as practitioners to really study this process and to go through it and to understand it and to memorize it. And these great practitioners, right, we talk about this phenomena called tukdam, where these practitioners, basically their bodies stay they stay in this state of concentration in the death process, and so their bodies stay sort of supple for a while. And so this is the thing, that like a really great practitioner is able, when they've gone through this, familiarize themselves with this, and so at the time of death they're able to actually recognize this process within themselves and then use that to be in this concentrative state of tukdam when they die.
아니 단단하죠. 단다 신데 논체 타서잖아. 마그노 신도 노아 걸러봐. 제바 말라. 여타 나라. 디소 셰데 카르르즈. 수수 마시 코네네 디소 존나네. 탄세데 노아 걸러봐 컨디션도 제바 말라봐. 디소 탄셀레오데네. 저 지금 우리도 소마 제 리부가 졸로네. 사참 사들라네. 산타라파 네 참모 신다 참모잖아요. 사라바도 책을 저도 네 사참모데 아니 대다지 것을 아니 사참모 참모라 신다 참모 대것은 신다 참모래 것은 동반일라네 살루톤 텐데 과창가네 동반일 살루톤 아니 전체가 살루 감시점은 텐데 살루톤네 사스티치바데네 폼부마레와 텐데 대야죠라 어디서 텐디고한기 제대로 내가 존다 몸부면은 네 대다지 안텐데 고요 말했어.
So in the tantric text on the death process, they talk about the sort of the four appearances. What is it? It's the red appearance, the orange. It's like there's the white attainment, black near attainment. Does anyone know the four? What is the four?
White appearance, red and grease.
Red and black near attainment.
Clear light.
Clear light. Okay, so yeah, so the four of those, right? So you go through these four processes, and this is also the process of your mind becoming increasingly subtle. So we talk about your gross mind, your subtle mind, and this very subtle mind, right? And so what's happening, and as you're going through these stages, you're getting down to this very subtle mind, and then these great practitioners are able to actually stay conscious and recognize that very subtle mind, right, that's then arising, and then they're able in that moment, right, if they have put a lot of energy into meditating on emptiness, then with that very subtle mind they're able to meditate on emptiness. If they're able to, or if they are really a great bodhicitta practitioner, they might use that very subtle mind to practice bodhicitta, and then they'll stay there in that incredibly subtle meditation, very powerful meditation for some amount of time.
아니 텐디 냐올레 센톰부 텐디 칭가야나 아니 트타지네 트타텔란 루이 펜바는 아니마가 트타지게 주지기잖아 루이 펜바카리 또나 텐디지 또고요 살았어 라 루이 펜바잖아 아니마 지 니마가 트타데게 니마 주 루이 펜바시 치종게 어텐디 데네네 트타르지네 단다틴 쳐와추클네 버들롱크나 나차르자네타 텐디잖아 치사과슬라니 트타야보제테네 버든조이카서 아니 수주그롱 글라우체 쳐왔 개와야솔레 지요라 나롱 쳔보 텐디차게 개보 쳔보요 이나 뜻서 딱나게 정도 배지파시요 자 차부.
And so of course these great practitioners, when they die, they'll stay in this meditation for a certain amount of time until their ability to stay in this concentration ends. And then they'll actually be able to sort of to go through the bardo and choose their next birth consciously, like with actual conscious choice. But this, of course, is something that's a very deep practice and a very difficult practice that's described in the tantric text.
아니 단단가서 트타지자더니 아주 시와 쳇도 쳇된군이 샤트 모토요 로와든 신의 민다그저 모다그다 딘디샤죠라 딜랑아서 시와가 따소마트 레게요사 말했어 아주 샤라 동번에 나와그 모토 바차 니미기 모토 바차 좀 람바 제네 샤죠라 디샤팅 아주 쳇된군네 강 딘디샤마토요 로와도 모다그다 딘디샤죠라 딘디올티 시와가 아주 소마도 총고요 말하잖아요.
Of course, if you die from like a car wreck or something like that, right, you're not going to be able to do all of these kind of practices and notice all this thing. Your death will be very quick, right? So what we're talking about here is the kind of death where you you sort of die in a controlled manner, sitting there, and you're able to see and sort of experience these different stages.
네요 아주 특다지자 특다미 타그마르라고도 요 가시 시대pana 잘라야부터 신르도 잘라야부터 솔 인사체 디설트는 신르네요 즈부머야 니마 니사 근데다 jinga tinde다 요에서 이나 틀 특다자 말레스.
There's also something that looks a lot like tuktam but is not tuktam, is that people can have, like, they can essentially enter a concentration based on attachment or something like that. So say if there's something they're really attached to in life, when they die, they can end up, through that attachment, they can end up sort of in a similar state to tuktam, but it's not tuktam because it's really based on this just really strong attachment.
네다 특다지자 마싱은 치와몽부 종몽부 조라 치통 디 종케탈마토 아니 특다자티 데토요사 말에 말에 치와 종아지오라 치통 내가 단단히 종 마시코니 치와몽부 종 어텐디텔 특다마토 아니 제말 딜라부 특다자티 카보이사 가르자는 아주 시토 다하모고 특다 징가도 가르 시토 내니 종트노 소아 몽부 종데네 수줄이 시갈람 탄세 따톤세 마카르란 테레세 소마하고라 아니 chasa chamungo de sa chamu te kausane substitute tene tetuesa tila jonda mombo matona this couple is.
So this is something that we have to really study and practice to be able to do, right? Of course, this is something that requires great practice and study so that when we are at the time of death, we're able to actually have real familiarity with all of these processes and understand them and recognize them when they're happening, right? It's not something that's easy to do.
Ni tanga su chala la cha tindi sha jora jen sha chen do cha to tesola chane sha jora tilangel che petis jongo sama khat ko jen sha kar china tindi chene.
Yeah, but when we talk about the people that get fixated on like an object or out of attachment, of course, that's just something that they've sort of become accustomed to being attached to that. So it just happens to them naturally. It's not like a process they've studied.
Anita sache jibatira. The
fourth section here, how the intermediate stage is assumed after death.
Zubu cholon rote, nengaso sheza tanyata, pordundra chibar, shiwato pordundra tinya. Penate song dan tomeza oh, titan. Aso zubu, navshi zubu to katani shiato, pordundra tinya.
So when we talk about the bardo and death, right, so what happens is that, of course, we talked about how the sort of consciousness or the heat kind of essentially collects one way or the other into this heart center, and then slowly the heart center, everything, and then finally at the moment of death the consciousness separates from the body, and so that is the moment you enter the bardo. The way the text describes it is sort of weights on a scale, but the basic idea is that one is the other, right? So when the consciousness leaves the body, that is entering the bardo.
And Pordu, let's say the Pordu's at the Kandijira, Pordu, Mundisaba Shasiches and a pena, the Kia Pordundone, Sukia Kara Legona, Jima, or Tigazini Chasuchi, Shadava, no ombo can so tomages and Meombo, Nayombo, Soma, you are Conjila. And the Casa Kanduna Tobame by Jutunke, or Tindis.
So when you enter the bardo, you're going to have the sort of form of whatever your next birth will be. And then also you'll have all of your sort of sense faculties, and the understanding also is that you can essentially go anywhere and move through anything, right? So you're sort of like a ghost in that you can kind of go anywhere and move through any kind of, there's no obstructiveness essentially to a bardo being.
And it made it all Hubbard, you are much a sebu, tarembun tonto, or Tindi, Juntra, you are no libel. Gasan, some Galena Tinanda, 네 버두가 레드랜드 아웃 인디
So the Bardo beings can see sort of incredible distances, and just by thinking about somewhere, they can go there.
네 당가서 시야는 남지 버두가 나오시죠라 티칼라 가tunga mai ngarta ane dojiden chotte mato yo marezen shezo yores ina tatele yo dojiden chotte tizen yotela cheto tsoba mumbo yores nena jon kashino nane ti shezo yores.
So there's sort of a popular saying or belief, this idea that the only thing that actually is obstructive, that like stops a Bardo being, is the Bogaya, is the Chudin, I forget the English words. The statue. No, what is the Chudin? Why am I forgetting the English for that? Stupa. The Bogaya stupa. The only thing that's obstructive to a Bardo being is the Bogaya stupa, that it can't go through that. But of course, there's a lot of debate about this as well.
아니 ngaso paila shejizen shesochiyore. Karazana naushidum ponrutin samsalti naushiti control kichin mandria sheajora. Tisolesana kawato do kareli pona kawato do so chagrezen shesochiyore.
Kari gawa tangdo. Gawa.
Kawa perduga naushijora. Tin yabuz machana til tani kartarezan she. Kaoshanro she ta she. Tani jire. Ti 식좀 보잖아 봐 도도 가와 가레나 고차 밀리전 미세 틴디 셰소요 셰자도 버두도 콘주 차보도 틴디고네 신로라 버둔로자라 틴디 제테나 나우시 카사칼 지니 참살 나우시티기 도도 아네 콤바트 카랄 포나 아네 자네 두그레세 Gawa tangtoti gawa pena namshi jora perduga namshiti pena ti gawa imbiku namshiti juni tila sisena te chane I content drojaresen so sheso tinde yoresen hagoza
tingidi parugi namba shepati gawa gi nangla di kariti
degma pena perduga namshiti tila namshito nyanda shezene tanye chitare ti tanye tatane sheza te kar she julana jobu shimbo shikshimbo yomba konjel te dodo kawa karel kesona katumar dodo kawa chane ndugres penanga su pai changre to shinre yore ti chane tinde yore ti karelzen shek charezene sheso lombala sheso
adi sheso
kaji tinde yores akoze
Tsewang.
So
there's these sayings. For some reason, these sayings, I find these they have these nice colloquial sayings, and I find them really hard to understand and translate every time they explain them. There's some saying about Bardo beings and something to do with pillars and rocks, and something about pillars and rocks, and when you die, they like hitting them. But I didn't really get it, so we're going to move on. Sorry. I'm sure it's a very pithy saying in Tibetan.
개말 단에 땅가서 버두가 쳇쳇샤라 버두가 쳇쳇 가르레즈나 아니 자부데 제동가서 버두를 같이 데코레스 같이 거나 자마 지제고
같이 거는 되게
시시시고 지제고 렌타 지제고라서는 아니 니버트 기알레 비쳐 니버 기알레 그래서 에나 쳇쳇이 jabu den retene mari chi yonjo pardulunro tindi chenene jabu jegu chasate ani ngipat kya legres mato yana ngipat jegu gorazete go mar pena ni pardunro mathane khatishana chite chini jene kya legat nima chigi jene kya ni sandamanda yores yana pardu chite nima den jena machi shi yo nima den jila shi Nima den kia lesa marana, machi shi.
Younger shigire.
Mombu shigre, pardula. Pardula shene, pardula kia le. Pardula shizona, katu pardula kia le.
Okay, nima di. Okay, so.
Nima dun. Nima den jila yunjo shi. Nima den jila yunjo shi. Kasi nima jegu chasate, ane kia lempi, kia lengre.
So the Bardo beings, when they go to the Bardo, they can stay there a maximum of 49 days. Right? You could be reborn in an hour, right, or whatever. It could be very quickly, but the idea is that every 7 days in the bardo, you actually die in the bardo and then are reborn in the bardo. And you can do this process then 7 times. So that, but you cannot, that every being is born, like, will have to take rebirth by the 49th day. So for every 7 days in the bardo being dies and then is reborn in the bardo, up to 49 days, at which point they take a rebirth. But it could happen before that as well, right? It could happen at any time before that. This is the maximum.
Penangaso pordu tene tanda kasakal nruto ache navshit. Ne pordu tsiseta pena duchimbo trachimbo yora. Duchimbo dukichimal pandrute ene tsiseti zosona pordu. Taru dukichimal kialegres. Dukichia chimal bebandravo to tindich. Penangaso lazata to sol ngama Langazu tindiche te duchimbo chimal beban rawo to tindi mombo ten toa yores. Tiso kar rashe jagores. Ne pordu ke navshitala siko kamo toa. Kaze me ba. Kaso duchiman rutene sit zoson taru tichimal kiales. Tindin rashe jagores. Yo yor duchimbo chimal ikonte kialenge beban ra tindi yores.
So the other thing is that, like, you say a bardo being is in the middle of a big rock or something when that time expires, and it gets reborn in that big rock. And so there's lots of examples of finding, like, sort of, skeletons or things in rocks. And the idea is that this was a bardo being that ended up taking rebirth at that place in that rock, because that's where they were when their sort of time expired, and they were reborn immediately, like within a rock.
Sounds like fossils.
I don't know. Don't ask me to translate fossils. I don't know how the word for fossils.
Fossils, 化石。
化石。
化石嘛，听起来很像化石。化石就是以前的动物死掉，然后因为那个
Is there a word for
不是化石，就是它是生的，生没死。
What's the word for fossil?
石头中间有些球，不是骨头。青蛙它没死。
哦，是活着的。
活着的。
Gela said, in the stone,
是。
they're animals like frogs, and it's alive.
Oh, it's alive.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't understand that. Okay.
西马的。不然呢，这多钱不钱呢？这起码达到了100万不多。那不是他们的，他了一块钱没啊？起码达到的。这西马的。
Candice nigiri.
Candice tinggal mah lhasa to ngapet langkazora. Langkazo duchimbo tiso patra tindiche duchimbo tiso tanga barji kara tindiche chimala pa ikotu zun jambo chan bebandra tindi. Tati mombo pela mombo ragi.
So the idea is that, thank you. Like, for example, when they're building roads or something and they break open the rock, and inside it they find like a frog or something that's still alive, that's like it's just like somehow encased in the rock.
不是化石，njordo mare，化石njordo。
对，他刚刚听错。所以有很多这样的。有很多吗？
有很多，我没有讲过。您同学们，现在。Gembatsu Jimbatsu Shera, Tonso, Tindi Yorezen, Lugiti Sono Mombodo.
I haven't seen this, but this is things that older people have told me many times.
Tingamalama said the meat said Mombo Shene, Sheson Tonso Zeni Tanda. Tito Tanda Jume Ginjutaze, Terasimoja, Kogon Tonyo, Losungasu Jumentrit. Kozo Tumba Yotobalak. Langazune lara dochembo yores ne dochembo te so mak tanda ngazum barje wa barje ke ne dochembo te so ka langazu te ne tikimal beban rago beba ta cheto luje te so no mombo yor ina nganto manyo.
Yeah, so I haven't seen this. There's a very famous teacher at Kyuto Gilama.
Pagi Gyume
Gilama. So at the Gyume Tantric College, there's a teacher there who witnessed this, that when they were building a road, they used explosives to crack open some stone, and in it they found a frog. But I have not seen this.
Tingaso karandashe jarasana parduke namshitene kazeme pa kale nandu ne ti ko ngaso parduke chisena ndampe ano chupares That pene kor ka duna nibadi zoti that khatu zandura. Tino je pardu ko chiseto. Ko kya ka duna sakala na chiset zondute. Tino kya le azat. Ta rashe jato tini mombudus.
So there's lots of the explanation of this is this idea that the bardo beings, right? Their sort of time in the bardo has expired, so they're reborn immediately, and it's like said to be like shooting an arrow, right? That he goes right to that point, so that they end up being reborn, in that stone.
Chichana tandati duto te sonola bebandram bura cherubako chichana mombu rasayo bara. So rashe karjayo hakumazo.
Maybe scientists have seen this a lot, but I don't know how they would explain it.
Tiwayo no masu kama kashin tiwatire.
Do you guys have any questions? No?
Like the bottle, the intermediate stage, every 7 days there is a chance.
No. You can be reborn at any moment.
Every moment.
Yeah, like an hour or a minute. But every 7 days you die in the bardo and then are reborn up to 7 times.
Okay.
And then you have to...
Because in Taiwanese culture, when people pass away, and then every 7 days, since the day they pass away, then every 7 days, then there will be a ritual, a ceremony, to recite. And then I didn't understand why before until I studied Buddhism. And I think maybe that's for, helping these people to get rebirth as soon as possible, right?
It's like a birthday
송콩기
celebration.
송바 공기 바이올라 디 콩소디 미지키시나 총나 디 니마 둔레레라 콩소디 제고 제게레
Doma.
디 콩소기 제도 빈토기 제도 던전데 그런게 숭바데 바도기 낭라 니마 둔레레라 디 콩소기 시게레 직스나 디 트레와 예사레.
Yes, and then they do it 7 times, like
Yes,
the
they do it 7
maximum is
times.
49 days.
Yeah. So
That's
Jiko
when
Jabo
I
di
was little. But now people are very busy. So they do it at the same time. They complete it maybe in 1 day. Not every 7 days.
yeah.
Will that work? Will
I
that
don't
help?
know. 공기 nguma 콩소디 니마 둔레라 테마 둔 콩소디 디 그레디 조가데 제바레 텐상 콩소 미망보디 테와차보 요청 콩소 니마 지키낭라 디 그레디 고차테 둔 테마직 제기레 디양 핀토기레베
토그레. 가르라제나 티 코로 니마시 카테시나시 코질라네 자테 마르타 몰란데 텐리차요라 티 니마시 제나 페그레라 니마 데근살라 마소 벨라 치바레스 니마 덴델 덤바 쳔본란데아요 티 가르라제나 신이 타티리 시소나 퍼둘런도네 니마 데기질라 윤조코 퍼둘리시 시고라 티 시팅가 덤반데 텐리체나 간두페토여레제나 티 시와티 수수그 파만라 돈로요 아니 주군라요라 주차라 ngupu 라요 테소요 사트솔도 펜토요레 야나 펜토 심보제네 코야 데와체도 테솔이 이 카푸 셰베르 야나 코 네까 리카자니치야 코코야리트라도 로파티스 티스찰 펜토요레제네 몽부셰요레
이네디 소티 디 고차테 디 문남테 디 Nima jikla, tengma dun, yang di nima di shipshu sheku kiringla tengma dun, teni chea ki jikpa jabareve.
Marampunan dembako, nyonyon dena, nyonyo tse, mombun dena, mombu tse, nipa mandra.
So it's still helpful, but it's of course less powerful, is the short answer here, right? It's better, the more you do it, of course, the more powerful it is, the more help it's going to maybe help the being to find the right karma or take a good rebirth, right? But it's still, of course, beneficial at making those prayers.
Hapo nima denre de guacarezana, nima denlo portu chendura. Shikalamula, aneko ndombande tindijana, yonjo portu chamogua. Kaptu kiwajimba leala, ne pento tindi yores in shega
Yeah.
yores.
The idea behind every 7 days might be that right, if they're dying and they're getting reborn, like they might not take rebirth. May help them to not take rebirth in the bardo, but to take a rebirth out of the bardo.
But birdu atene non chona chana kanga chimbo chiseyo. Kiwa lesa mara tindi chene birdu ledi lingamba zegora kiwa dikchanda kanga chimbo chiseyo.
It's understood in Buddhism that being a bardo being, it's very difficult to be a bardo being, and that you're like struggling to find a rebirth, and it can be really hard if you have these negative conditions, right? That's understood to be really a difficult place to be.
May I ask, the bardo being is there. Does it have intention? So it searches for the next rebirth, or it just waits for the conditions to arise to be rebirth?
So bardo ki mi te nangla di bardo ki kapsu di gewa te di tsigiri.
Kiwa lesa tsega pa ti chomba tsene dugo
Kama
yores.
tsigiri. Te nga di gewa
Kiwa ka kiwa lesa tsega kiwa lesa mara ne kanga yores.
Yeah, it is. It's looking for its next rebirth. It's trying to find its next rebirth.
Ane tanda nga su non chushane birdu ti tiza. Tiza reza. Tiza la na nga su birdu la kala ngone te za maraji. Nga su se to doa. Ti nga su se mo buto. Ti ka reza. Ko su tima lo no kyo ma to. Ani kazin. Chito ombo mi to ane zibu tsoma.
Yeah, kongsola di gewa limba di duba yori, yang di kongso di kari samatang yori.
Ko su kiwa la doba shichijo te kiwa la. Ko su kanga chicho te kiwa la mara. Pena nga su choko to te kala chi mara ne kasa kan dugura. Tino je ko su kiwa te le sa mara ne. Te kale jane o te.
So yeah, so they do really are searching to be reborn. It's like someone being hungry, looking for food. They have this like strong desire to take a rebirth, and they're trying to find this place for them to be reborn. And the other thing Geshe said is that we talk about them being smell eaters. There's this term smell eaters, right? They can't actually take normal sustenance, but they're understood that they can take sustenance from this like smells.
Naso pelanda jena katena miji shina chito se sasa ton yora to se ton hakora
C'est song?
somare se
C'est kari.
se la nga tsamba duni tichache somare da tela serela
Tikari me barkiri.
me bani tingul tsamba luni nga jeni ton chi do o te jiza titimati za somare
Song mari. Tampa tang.
tsamba mi gungu sane ni tung tichache do tela serla
Sel. Okay. So there's a special thing I think that includes sampa that they burn. I thought he was trying to say song, which is this other thing, but there's a special thing that they burn, which is what they're burning that for. Ser. Sa. Do you say ser?
Pasando
And people will prepare many offerings for,
I don't know.
People passing out. But in the bottle stage, can they receive that?
콩소 디 콩미지기 디 총 차르웨제라 미망버 콩라디 추바 포기레스 네 바도기 미테조 디 추바 테조 디 카르디 디베 롱주 체아여레베
choba bezana ngaso shal timati za kres mato chala ngupu dodote za yo mares ngupu.
Yeah, so the physical things they can't use, but the smells that they're able to take, they can receive the smells. That gives them sustenance.
Jamina mombuge tana shosh sandu mishisati shoka komombu change show shoko tindi show
Shoko.
milasane.
Yeah, they burn lots of paper. I guess in China they burn paper when people die.
Timati za kres ngaso pebaina tsambanda boto tindi Marndabu milasane ni tituaj
Tibetans, they burn the roasted barley, the tsampa, but the he's saying in China, I guess in Taiwan, they burn
In
paper.
Taiwan, like burn like paper money.
paper money.
Money or paper house. Like now, people even burn like apple Apple phones, not real one, you know, bigger ones. Can they receive that itself?
The Milisana, the Timajora, Timataza, your rares and
They can, the smell they can eat, essentially, but that they're not going to get a phone. No.
Yeah, like cows. Paper.
Yeah.
Purduk Mila Carres and Tizalar, Tiza, Timazak.
We call the Bardo people the smell eaters, is the literal translation.
Mila non shoot on a Purduk Mila, Tiza.
Tiza.
Anita was right.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you online. Thanks for coming. How long will you two be in?